Good morning, everybody. KT here with Wise Images Photography, and welcome to my channel, Wise Images. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If this is your first time, I want to say I'm glad that you are here. Today, we are going to go ahead and talk about 7 tips on how to capture birds in flight. And I hope that with these tips, it will help you to soar in your photography skills. And if you stick around to the end, I will tell you my thoughts about image stabilization. So let's get going. Number 1, understanding bird patterns. Before you go out, you want to check and see, like, what are the patterns of the bird? Are you planning on staying in one location to be able to see the birds come in because you know that they're roosting for the night? Maybe you might know that this is the particular time that the birds are going to be hunting. It's really important to kind of know what is the process of the bird. Is it a big bird that kind of glides easily through the air? Or is it a small bird like a kingfisher that just goes all sporadic and only sits still for like 30 seconds and takes off again? It's really important to understand what your subject is going to do so that it preps you to put you in the right spot and also prepare you for how you should move and how you are going to go ahead and photograph that particular animal. Now, number 2, that kind of leads us into the next thing about, getting yourself into the right spot based off of the behaviors of your animal. But now you want to also make sure that you have good directional lighting and that you have the wind to your back, or the sun, my apologies. You want to have the sun behind you and you want to have the wind behind you. For 2 reasons. 1, because the sun gives you that good directional lighting that we've talked about in the past. And 2, most birds will fly into the wind, especially big birds, because big birds kind of use that. And I feel like every time I don't know about you guys, but every time I say big bird, I think of big bird. And so, but needless to say, bigger birds are going to fly into the wind because they need that help with the lift on their wings. You will also notice that bigger birds will tend to fly slower into the wind, whereas the smaller birds are going to be a lot faster. And sometimes you'll even notice that birds will sit there and just kind of hover in the air as they let the wind hit them on super windy days, which is really kind of cool and unique to watch. Number 3, watch your background. It is very easy to photograph a bird that is up in the air, up against the sky, because that autofocus, boom, it has nothing else to fight with, right? But the problem is that then you're only going to end up with either a blue sky or maybe just a white background. And that doesn't really make for a very interesting picture. So what you want to do is let the animal, the bird, get closer to the ground, a little bit lower, because then you might get some trees in shot, or maybe you might get some rocks, or maybe some bushes, or maybe there might be some beautiful, flowery bush that you might be able to get as an example. And that would create more contrast in your image. It would create a more interesting image. And if you all remember, the further away the background, the greater the bokeh that you're going to get. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about setting your focal point. Now, I actually learned this from another photographer when I was doing dog photography. And the suggestion was made is to go ahead and put your focal point at the top of your frame, right smack dab in the middle. Because whenever you're photographing dogs that are running, they tend to do this hoppy thing, right? And so by putting that focal point right there in the middle, you knew where the focal point was. You knew that the dog was going to come right in and eventually jump right into that focal point on the top of your frame. And I ended up transferring that same kind of concept over to when I was photographing birds. And then that way, if I go to lift up and photograph the bird, I know where my focal point is and I don't have to go searching for it, if it's on the left or on the right, because maybe I was using the rule of thirds. So when I'm walking around or I'm setting up and I know I'm just going to be stationary, I already know that I'm all ready to go, I put that focal point right there on the top. That way when I pull up to go ahead and photograph that bird, I'm all set and not having to find that focal point. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about camera settings. You have to kind of think about what's happening for the day when you go out. How am I going to set those camera settings? We're basically making those decisions based off what is the lighting doing for the day and what is that bird doing. Is it a semi-cloudy day? Is it a cloudy day? Is it a sunny day? Is the bird a big bird where it's going to go a lot slower, which means you can go ahead and slow your shutter speed down to like 1/50th of a second? Is it a small bird where they go super duper fast and you have to go ahead and speed up that shutter speed and hit like 1/30, 200th of a second or 1/4000th of a second? You have to remember that, you know, the faster the shutter speed, the less light that it's going to be let in. Then you want to think about your aperture, because you want to think about how much depth of field do you want. And so I tend to put mine at f5 or f8 depending on the situation. Now personally, I like f8 a little bit better because I find it just seems to be a little bit easier for me. And then for my ISOs, I actually set that on automatic because, let's say for example, the constant, you know, you change directions with your camera, I let the ISO decide my exposure basically for my camera, but I decide what speed and how much light I want to be let in with my aperture. So definitely got to think about what you want to do with your camera settings depending on what's happening with the situation that you're photographing in. If you are getting value out of this, please make sure that you go ahead and hit that like button so that way other people know that this is a cool video to watch and they can get some tips to help them with their photography skills as well. Next, I'm going to go ahead and talk to you guys about how to pan. Make sure you guys use your entire body to go ahead and follow that bird, because it will also make it easier to track the bird. It will also give you less fatigue in your arms. If you're using your entire body, remember to tuck those arms in. The other thing is you want to make sure that you wait for that bird to get in range, find your focus point, and stay on your bird. And if you lose focus, refocus again and go right back at it. Before I share my last point and also about what I think about image stabilization, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in today. I really greatly appreciate it. If this video has helped you so far, please consider sharing this with others so that way we can help other people with their photography skills. My next point is practice. Practice, practice, practice. And I'm kind of giggling because this rooster is really loud. I'm glad that we all love birds around here. So needless to say, practice, practice, practice. I have been doing this for a very long time and I still practice. I will go out, take my camera, and I just kind of randomly go, all right, there's this, the ball on top of the fence. I jump up and I see if I can hit it. Or I'll see a street sign and I go, okay, I want you to hit the numbers on the street sign. And I jump up and I try to hit the numbers on the street sign. It's very important to kind of keep yourself on, you know, target there, practice those skills so that you get better. And then, you know, sometimes there will just be birds flying around and I'm just like, hey, follow the bird. See if you can track it, even without taking any pictures, just because I want to follow the motion of tracking the bird. Sometimes I'll bring Bo out in the backyard and I'm just like, because he gets the zoomies, he's like, ah! And he's just like, and so I'll get my camera out and I'll just photograph him, just to photograph him, just so that I can try getting different images in different lighting conditions, just to see how I can fine tune and tweak, you know, my photography skills and whatnot. So make sure that you guys go ahead and practice, practice, practice. Now let's talk about my thoughts on image stabilization. I've had photographers tell me to turn my image stabilization off. And I did turn my image stabilization off for a while. And what I found was I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, y'all. After that, I felt like every single image I took, even with the faster shutter speeds, was horrible. It wasn't sharp. It was, for whatever reason, it wasn't working for me. Now, the theory behind it is that if you use image stabilization when you have 1/3200th of a second or faster, that image stabilization really, you're kind of offsetting it. You're making the lens go slower and it's, you know, not really designed for what it's designed for. But what I would suggest is that you go ahead and go out and you try photographing with image stabilization on, and you photograph it with it off, and you see what works best for you. For me personally, I found I like to leave it on, but that's just me. Let me know what you liked most in today's episode. Go ahead and drop that in the comment section below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing, hitting that notification bell so that way you don't miss any other future episodes. I want to say, have an awesome rest of your week. You are awesome, and I'll see you later, alligator.